Welcome to Truth Talk Wisdom Walk with C.A. Curtis. I'm Carolyn. Does truth matter? For me, Truth Talk began in my early 20s when an LA talk show host challenged listeners to stop lying. Lying? Me? Well, lying didn't sound likely, since Papa was a philosophical Texas cowboy turned IRS agent who quoted poetry in his free time, and my godly Idaho farm girl wise mother worked for the Board of Education. Yet, in my teens, I lived a lie. So I took the host's challenge really to heart and paid close attention to my words. I was guilty. While dating, I believed a lie to make myself feel better. And then I lied to my parents. After that challenge, I talked less, listened more, and immediately self-corrected when I slipped up. It was an exercise which continues to the present. Stop mid-sentence, make corrections. No, that's not exactly right, etc. To clarify, I'm not talking about harmless humor, perfection, ordinary mistakes, or forgetfulness. Reassuring a scared child in the dark with, "It's gonna be okay, sweetie," or protecting someone from despots banging on the door may be necessary. This is about bearing false witness, betrayals, cheating, and stealing, which you then cover up with lies. The beginning of Truth Talk is simply stop lying, especially those big lies. Also, stop exaggerating, making things up, making excuses for stupid choices, just automatically repeating as absolute truth what you just heard on the news. You don't know if that's true or not, and if everybody's all saying the same thing, you might want to check that out. What about telling little white lies? Well, it is awkward when someone shows up dressed weird and wants your opinion. Be kind. It is just your opinion. On another level, we lie to ourselves about our value while comparing ourselves with others that we deem above or below us. Judging others below us puts us way below them, and that's not helpful. We ruminate on negative self-talk, and we fear things that could but never happen. Not helpful either. Back in high school, I wanted to be a counselor. When my parents took me to church for a talk about the differences between introverts and extroverts, I was hooked. From then on, I studied why people do what they do. I read Dr. Carl Menninger's book, Love Against Hate, which I bought with babysitting money and I still own to this day. Life made more sense. I was the new girl, awkward, wearing homemade outfits, so I felt kind of stared at and uncomfortable walking into the noisy lunchroom alone. I was from a smaller town in Texas, and all of a sudden there I was in Los Angeles, Gardena of all places. It helped to know that others may feel the same way and that others were either extroverts or introverts also. In school, when we read Shakespeare's Hamlet, Act 1, Scene 3, Polonius advised his son, "This above all to thine own self be true, and it must follow as the night the day. Thou canst not then be false to any man. I loved the nobility and the rhythm and the rhyme of his words. I'm not saying any particular thing about Polonius's character, you understand, but I loved that sentence. The 10 Commandments were posted and Bibles were valued. They were handed out in public schools. I still have my copy that I got in elementary school. I read it through in my teens, and King James was easy after reading Shakespeare. The history lessons on life, motives, and the consequences were clear, especially the importance of truth setting us free. Truth mattered and was not in question by more educated minds. But I was a teenager in LA, and we were on the cusp of the sexual revolution. That revolution spread like a virus, a very contagious virus. It affected everyone to some degree. Ourselves, our parents, our kids, our community, our nation. The 60s promised freedom from godly standards, freedom from morals, but accelerated deception, poverty, disease, and death. Statistics cannot measure the depth of the pain. The lie about freedom from moral restraint affected the once strong lower and middle class families far more than the sheltered upper classes. With their stronger social norms, expectations, and private schools, the upper class fared better. But that wasn't my neighborhood. When the walls of protection collapsed, I learned about life the hard way as a teen wife and mom, doing my best to care for my family. That season, during a missionary outreach, we church ladies sewed muumuus. They still wear those in Hawaii, anyway. But we sewed muumuus for mental hospital patients. We were not the psychologists or the therapists there to help patients embrace reality. Instead, we were trained to sit, visit, and not argue. So, if a woman believed she was Cleopatra, I would listen as if she were. Those patients didn't think they were ordinary or a different sex, only famous. Delusion was their reality, but it still had boundaries. The ability to tell the difference between true and false, to discern between reality and non-reality, was a test for measuring mental health. How is it that the test standard is sometimes lowered to feelings, fiction, and fairy tales as long as you fit in successfully with some group? And you can certainly find that group online. But how does it affect you if you can't tell the difference between what is true and what is not true? We learned that subjective reality is the viewpoint of each person about what is real. Objective reality is what is and exists if viewed or not by anyone. The all things are relative idea became popular, along with the idea that we all create our own reality. Well, there is some truth to that. Some. Well, that can only work for you when you have enough sense to know the difference between air and water, between steak or dung. I was deluded. I was living a happy delusion for months, and reality hit me very hard when my husband left. It was odd. I grieved for lost family, relationships, and dreams. I loved being a wife and mother, and I was happy, but my situation wasn't real. I was not loved or valued. I had to think about it. Would I choose to be happy anyway? I was happy in the lie. Would I choose to be happy to know the truth, as awful as it was, as awful as it felt? And I had to choose, and it was an act of willpower. I chose to love the truth more than my own comfort and my own feelings. And that gave me peace, and peace brought happiness to me. As a high school dropout and single mom, I worked in a noisy sewing sweatshop, earning $50 a week. Half that paid my childcare. Determined to keep my kids safe and make life better for us, I lived with my parents and headed back to school, with setbacks along the way. Eventually, I got remarried and earned a teaching degree where my job fit with my children's school schedule, so I could be with them as much as possible. Today, the 60s sexual revolution continues, and the price of ignorance is high as babies are aborted and children abandoned. The consequences of ideas and actions play out in our lives and become our story, our history, our legacy. What story are we writing? What legacy lives on? How can we know what we need to know to bring civility back, to give us a common purpose, and to help us rebuild our families and our broken culture? A good place to start is choosing to love truth. Love truth more than winning. Love truth more than being right. Love truth more than feeling safe. Love truth more than being accepted. Love truth more than you love yourself. Over 2,000 years ago, John, a man who got canceled and banished to a small island for his words, said it well. And you shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. That's John 8:32. Truth is a solid foundation. Stand on it. Truth matters, and you matter. Love truth, be grateful, and do good. Please like and subscribe for more content. And thank you for joining the journey of Truth Talk, Wisdom Walk. Until we meet